Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Friday news roundup and lots of things going on this week. Megyn Kelly has Jake Tapper eat a little humble pie, and Joe Biden, more disclosures about not just cognitive difficulties but his physical difficulties as well. So we'll start with those two stories when we come back from these important messages. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com, and the name of the website is The Blade of Perseus. And most of all that he writes, his podcasts and video appearances, are on his website, The Blade of Perseus. So please come join us there for everything Victor. Victor, so we have Jake Tapper was on the Megyn Kelly show, and she had him confess that he had been unfair to Laura Trump for criticizing her for saying something about a poor stuttering Joe Biden when that wasn't the truth at all. And he said he was sorry for that, and he seems to be trying to sell his book, Original Sin. So I was wondering your thoughts on that interview. I know you saw it.
Yeah, I was on Megyn Kelly today. We discussed that in part, among other things. But did he ever really say, I'm sorry? He said it, I mean, he might have called Laura Trump up, but did he ever say to an audience, what I told you was untrue? It was clear to me that he was mentally challenged, cognitively in decline. And I attacked people who said that. And I am sorry to all of you, that was unprofessional. I don't expect him to do the proper thing and resign, because he misled the country with catastrophic effects. If you think of the border and Afghanistan and the auto pen part, all the terrible things that Biden did. Well, I shouldn't say Biden did, somebody did in his name. So he didn't do that. He did say he felt humiliated. But here's my point. Why has he said anything about that he was fooled or he was mistaken? And the answer is pretty clear. It's for two reasons. One, Joe Biden is out of power, and more importantly, he hasn't been president since June of 2024, and he has no power to either punish or reward Jake Tapper. What I mean is, if you flip that over in the converse, if Joe Biden was president right now, would he have said that? No. If Joe Biden had stepped down and Kamala Harris was the candidate right now, would he have said that? No. So he was lying when he knew he was lying. So then the question is, why did he say it now? And the answer is that he has a book out. The second thing is, his publisher has told him, you wrote this book quickly, but we didn't realize all the time on tape that you said the very opposite of the book. The book is accusatory of the media class for not detecting this, but you were one of the kingpin. You were a debate moderator. So we're going to have to square that circle. So we suggest you go, I'm just imagining what they told me. So we suggest you go out and you not only say you were mistaken, you try to say you're humble, or you hire a media consultant, which he did, to handle the incoming flack. So my question is the same as Russian collusion, laptop disinformation, 51 intelligence authorities, thousands of files that were classified at Mar-a-Lago. Do they ever apologize? No. Do they ever learn from their lies? No. They just go on to the next. So why would I believe that when he was lying then, he's telling the truth now? I don't believe that. I don't believe he feels humiliated. I believe he saw that he had a chance. His co-author and Axios author actually had more integrity. He did criticize the media cover-up, but he was not going to get a contract because he didn't have a marquee name. So Tapper just kind of married himself to this other guy's book project, and now he's going to make millions of dollars after deceiving the American people. And he doesn't seem to be upset about it. I'd like to just ask him some questions. Jake, would you just please tell us, since you wrote the book, and I haven't read it and I'm not going to buy it, who was the person who conducted the auto pen pardons? Who was the one that came and said, Schiff needs a pardon, Fauci needs a pardon, Milley needs a pardon? Here's what we wrote, just auto-pen it. That's what happens. Can he ask that question?
I don't think so. But that brings us to the second topic, which is there's more that has come out, and I'm not sure. I think you and Jack talked a little bit about it. Joe Biden's prostate cancer has been announced this last week. And so he had not just cognitive problems, but he had this physical debility as well, which probably I'm not a doctor, but it probably
Somebody
augmented
chastised
his
me for mentioning it, and somebody wrote and said, well, you're not a doctor, stay in your lane. I don't have to stay in my lane. I'm not stupid. Anybody knows that if you're president of the United States, and even if the medical consensus said after 75 you might not want to take a PSA test, Donald Trump took one. And the president, who is the most important man in the world and the most medically observed, should take a PSA. But according to them, we're supposed to believe he didn't take a PSA test for 11 years? Took one in 2014. And then we're supposed to say, well, he's over 2014. This is 11 years ago. He was he was 71. So if he has cancer, he will die with it rather than from it. Well, you don't know that. You don't know that. He was a vice president. So he took a PSA. So my question would be, why don't you call White House Dr. O'Connor, put him under oath, and said, since he has been president the last 4 years, given it's the consensus of the urologists that have weighed in on this subject, that he did not get a metastasized tumor from prostate cancer suddenly since he left office. He had to have that. So you're telling me that when he complained of symptoms, he just now complained them? So would you please testify? We're going to ask you one question. Did you ever give the President of the United States, in the last 4 years when you were attending to him, a PSA test? I'm not talking about did you ever record it. I'm not talking about did you ever include it in your summary. Did you ever give him a PSA test? And I think that could be discoverable. I think he did. I think they did, and they monitored it, and I think Joe Biden in 2016 made a joke about prostate cancer. He said something to the effect that, well, I told Barack I would be his president as long as I could unless I had prostate cancer. So there were all these questions, and we all know that that type of virulent cancer doesn't appear on the spot. And we all know the President of the state is monitored for every simple symptom. So we all know, according to Mr. Ezekiel, Rahm Emanuel's brother and an architect of Obamacare, that he believes he could have had it for 10 years. And it surely, he said, he was the most likely scenario. And I think Dr. Hamadi, who was on Fox, who's also a urologist, expert surgeon, said that the chances are very likely that he entered the presidency with it. And you're telling me that his doctor didn't know about that? So that's the second thing. They not only took a cognitive declining president and used him as a veneer to usher in a left-wing agenda, but they knew that he was sick. And they did not want to disclose that to the people, because if they had disclosed it, they're not sure that Kamala Harris at that point could do the job. So that was an ultimate, from the Democratic Party is really not a Democratic entity. They have not had an open nomination in 8 years. They did not nominate him through a free process. They took Jim Clyburn, pushed the date up of South Carolina. So it would be the first primary you'd vote. Then Biden had lost the New Hampshire and Iowa caucuses to Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. There was Elizabeth Warren. And then in a 35-day process, they all mysteriously left. And then they were left with Joe Biden. Remember, Cory Booker in one of the debates basically said, I don't understand what he's saying. His cognitive decline was clear in 20. But they thought, you know what? We can use good old Joe Biden from Scranton. He's the veneer, and we can push the farthest left agenda we've ever had, and we can get away with it because we changed the voting laws under the guise of COVID so that 70% of the votes cast in the swing states shall not be in-person votes as they had. We're going to flip it so they're going to be mail-in, and they're going to be early balloting, and there's going to be less effort, less ability, less certainty that they're all going to be verifiable. And then we're going to put Joe Biden in the basement, or maybe kind of like a drive-in movie scenario where he's in a car and they all honk their applause. But he's not going to campaign, and then we're going to get him president. We know he's cognitive decline, and rather than be a disadvantage, that's useful, because he can be a useful vessel and put a moderate veneer on this hardcore neo-socialist agenda. The only thing we have to do is watch Joe so that he's able to, 3 days a week, 4 hours a day, to pull it off. And B, he's always been a cranky, mean SOB, and he is vicious, and we can't let him go get off my grass rants. And they pulled it off to give them credit for 3.5 years. And then the whole thing collapsed, and they said to Joe, well, Joe, we created you, we insider donor class, and we gave you the nomination. You and Jill had a grand old time. Dr. Jill had her moments of glory and fame, and you'll make money. And now we're done with you. You're no longer useful, so get the blank out. And in 24 hours, they canned him, and then they thought, well, we didn't really have an open primary in 2020, and we had a fake campaign, so we'll just have no open primary in 2024, and we'll just pick you, Kamala. And then somebody said, well, what do we do? The narrative was that we couldn't get rid of Biden because she's a nincompoop, and she's unqualified. Well, we have 48 hours. Now we make her into Cicero. She's eloquent. She's vivacious. She's charismatic. She's dynamic. She's young. And we'll raise $1 billion. And that's what they did. So they're not the party of democracy.
And I'm sure Jake Tapper participated in the brilliance of Kamala Harris, right?
Now he has a new little meme that, well, it's very well known that both the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign didn't like me. No, nobody knows that. They liked you. When you tore apart Laura Trump and slandered her as cruel and said that she was making fun of Biden's stutter, you knew that wasn't true. You were an operative for Joe Biden. And you don't have the guts to come out and say, you know what, I'm at a point in my life that I did something very wrong and I misled the American people, and that had cosmic consequences, and I'm going to have to resign. And the very irony was that people have been interviewing him that have suffered, right? And they have suffered their careers during Me Too. There's a lot of them, and they lost everything. And yet they're interviewing him, who created a far grievous offense against the American people than they ever did, and they must be thinking, he gets off free and makes it millions of dollars on books, and they destroyed our careers. You know what I was thinking when I mentioned that last comment about reporters that had their careers ruined and interviewing? The best example, I'll be explicit, was Mark Halpern. He was Me Too. Do you remember that during the hysteria? I don't want to comment on whether he was culpable or not, but he lost everything, and he apologized. And he lost everything, and then he created a new career as a podcast interviewer where he was empirical, and he's very good. He's not partisan, and he's analytical. And so I'm saying to Jake Tapper, look what Mark Halpern did. He resurrected his career. He was done in injustice. You weren't done in injustice. So you're basically not going to resign and evading coming to terms with what you did to someone who did come to terms with what he did and learn from it, and now is one of the premier journalists in America, I think, because he's honest. And so he should take that as a model. I really like Mark Halpern.
What I noticed about all the coverage was this week is they of course have been asking, well, who was making the decisions, since obviously Joe Biden was having a lot of trouble in that. But what they're not saying, or what I think is kind of striking, is that given that he was so bad off cognitively and he had such physical debility, it really tells you something about Kamala Harris, that even they didn't want their DEI vice president to step into the presidency. They would have kept anything rather than have Kamala Harris.
And it wasn't because she was DEI, it's because she had the most left-wing voting record. To the left of Bernie Sanders. She was on record protesting against deportation of any illegal alien. She was on record of being against fracking. She was going to ban gasoline cars. Every radical left-wing position. So they thought, you know what? She's incompetent, she's not very bright, and she cannot speak. Anytime there's a moment, she'll go into a word salad. They knew that. So they said, she is the Spiro Agnew of our era. Just like Nixon was under assault because of Watergate, and they wanted to get rid of him. As long as Spiro Agnew was there, the people said, oh my God, we can't have Agnew. And so they got rid of him. They cooked up. He had done some things wrong as Maryland of government. They were going to impeach him. He pled nolo contendere. They sentenced him, and then they brought in Jerry Ford, and everybody said, good old Jerry Ford from Michigan. He'll work. We can get rid of Nixon. So that's what they were thinking when they used this waxen effigy. We'll get diversity. And Joe Biden had cooked his own goose, because he had in advance said he was going to pick a black woman when he got caught up in the euphoria of the George Floyd riots. And everybody thought, okay, Stacey Abrams, Maxine Waters, London Breed, San Francisco mayor, Karen Bass, LA mayor. She's got a great career. She has a rendezvous with the fires. So they did that, and then when they thought that they would never have to deal with her, And then when they dealed her, just on spec, she started talking. And they said, oh my God, we were right. For 48 hours, they said, oh, this is so great. They were so giddy to get rid of Joe. And she'll be a very effective wax and effigy. But then they said, oh my gosh, she can't talk. I know what we'll do. We will put her on ice. She will have no interviews. She will have no press conferences. She will have no extemporary speaking. That's exactly what they did. And finally the media goes, but how about us? We don't get any exposure interviewing her. And then she had those softball embarrassing interviews, and then she started hiring Beyonce and Al Sharpton and
anybody to distract from her.
And the donor said, we'll take care of it. We'll outraise Trump. The Democratic Party's got the money, not the Republicans. And they were right. And she lost. And then they cheated the entire thing. We now know that all of her pollsters were telling her and her handlers, you're going to lose. You're going to lose big. You're going to lose the Electoral College. You're going to lose the popular vote. You're going to lose all the swing states. Every one of your issues is losing. And then she said, but that's not what NPR says. I'm going to win by 4 points. That's not what the Marius poll says. That's not what Gallup and CBS or Harvard. So they were worse than her internal polls and lying. All of those pollsters who are now telling us that Trump has a very unpopular approval rating in 100 days, he doesn't. But they were lying through the whole campaign. So the money, the $1 billion, the fact she was DEI, all of the polls that were rigged, it didn't help her. Finally, the American people said, I'm done with all this. I can't take it anymore. And they turned on them.
A commendation of the American people, to be sure. And what's strange is all those lies escalated, and they keep escalating. Even Jake Tapper is just clinging to, he's just lying once again, you know. Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, I have humility.
I have humility, but I really didn't know. It didn't come out until later. And
I tell you, I was on Megyn Kelly's for almost 2 hours. And I just watched her clip. She held him to count. She was tough on him. And I thought she was wonderful. That was the first time anybody has ever done that. And the only reason he went on her show was because she's like number 2 or 3 in podcast land. So he knew that he was thinking, what are the chances that I would sell 50,000 more books versus a little hour of pain, and maybe I can not sound contrite? She didn't even let him do that. She tried to. But why, and then we get into the other peripheral very quickly. We mentioned Joe Biden, but why did Joe Biden announce? Because we're supposed to feel, and I do feel bad for him. I would not want to I have a urology appointment tomorrow. I hope I get good news now that I think of it at 8:45. I haven't had one in a long time. But my point is, why would they announce that Joe Biden suddenly now has metastasized cancer 3 days before this blockbuster book comes out? It couldn't be that they would be leveraging his illness and say, you know what, let's take attention away from Jake Tapper's book and then put it toward Joe Biden. So if you think you're going to criticize Joe Biden, you can be like David Axelrod. Yes, but now that he's got a possible terminal illness, we just got to lay off. So the left, everybody should remember, they're capable of anything. This comes on the tail. I thought, did you learn anything about Russian collusion? Did you learn anything about Kevin Kleinsmith forging documents for FISA courts? Did you learn anything about the crooked career of James Comey? Did you learn anything about lying about the laptop, saying it was Russian? Did you learn anything that the FBI had it for a year and didn't tell anybody? Did you learn anything that the FBI partnered with Twitter to suppress the news? Did you learn anything that Anthony Blinken helped round up 51 people to lie their heads off the American people, that the laptop was made in Russia or something? Do they ever say, I'm sorry? We're just supposed to, well, that was then. Now they're telling you the truth. No, you lie, 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 lie. And why do they do all this? Because they hate Donald Trump. Because he is the first Republican in my lifetime that is waging a 360-degree, 24/7 counter-revolution. What do I mean by that? It's not that I'm going to close the border alone. It's not going to do with the racist DEI, do away with it. It's not that we're going to try to restore deterrence abroad. It's not that I'm going to address the transgender. I'm going to address the mechanisms by all of which this aberration happened. I'm going to look at the court system and lawfare. I'm going to look at the foundations that fund all these people and say they're nonpartisan. I'm going to attack some of them. I'm going to look especially at the universities who are getting away with racism, taking foreign money, not declaring it, not respecting the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment. I'm going to look at the whole student loan process. I'm going to look at violence committed against students, dorms, racists, and I'm going to look at the media, NPR, PBS. So he's looking at all the institutions that allow these crazy ideas that don't have any popular support to be mainstream. And that's why they hate him so much. Reagan didn't even do it. Neither of the Bushes did it. There's not going to be, I don't know, I don't see any way out that either one side is going to win and the other is going to lose. I don't see a compromise.
Well, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about South Africa. Stay with us, and we'll be right back.
Time is our most precious commodity, and we've heard from so many listeners who've asked for advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution and the rise and the fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church. With Hillsdale College's free online courses, you can even take Victor Davis Hanson's class, The Second World Wars. This free 7-lecture course will help you to understand this massive and complex conflict in a new way. It will give you a clear picture of why the war was fought and how the Allied powers ultimately triumphed in order to save the West from a new form of tyranny. This class is taught by Victor Davis Hanson and Hillsdale's president, Larry P. Arnn. The course is self-paced so that you can start whenever and wherever. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/VDH to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/VDH to enroll for free. hillsdale.edu/VDH.
Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor on X. His handle is @VDHanson, and on Facebook at Hanson's Morning Cup. So if those are your social media channels or platforms, please come join him there. So Victor, a lot with South Africa just recently. In fact, the South African president, and I hope I get his name right here, Cyril Ramaphosa was here to talk with Donald Trump in the White House, and I listened to that interview, and it was very interesting. Donald Trump did not let him off on the murders that are occurring with farmers. And
showed him a video.
Yeah, he did, and then he had a whole bunch of papers with stories about all these people. But I just want two things so you can go off on either
Well, he
one.
also had the golfer to testify that
Yeah.
Ramaphosa brought with him, and the guy basically said, well, I'm a guest to show, the government wants me to show that this is exaggerated, but in fact it's not. And then he gave examples of how reverse racism, if that's the word.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second thing that you can comment on, either President Trump and the South African president, or Rubio, who was torn into by Senator Kaine, and he held his ground about the South African refugees being special cases and that they weren't doing this for other people that should be refugees.
No, they weren't doing it except for 3 million of them, of the 12 million that came in, that didn't even have to, as the South African, was it 48? So the 48 people are in danger, and they have applied for refugee status in their country, and they are granted 48 people. But because they're white, these left-wing people say that it's racist. But it's not racist to open the borders and have 12 million people, all non-white, by design, I guess, but more importantly, refugees who don't even apply for refugee status. They're economically challenged, but not politically, and then you give them status so they won't be deported without any verification, but they don't get it. They don't even apply to it. They're already illegally broken the law. What if the 48 had flown and said, oh, I lost my passport. Donald Trump, can you give me They didn't do that. They applied. So it's even worse than that. And Marco Rubio just said the only reason you're upset is they're white, because that's your whole party's racist. And he didn't back down. He said, well, I wouldn't have, Senator Ron Holland, I wouldn't have voted to confirm you. And he goes, I wouldn't expect you to, given, who you are.
He said that's a commendation of how well I'm doing my job. The fact that you regret it.
My only slight criticism of him, he said, you had a margarita with a person who was a trafficker, a gangbanger, and an illegal alien. We could have added, spousal abuser. Remember his wife said she felt afraid he was going to kill her? And you went down there and had a margarita with you, and then you were basically telling the El Salvador government, I'm a Yankee imperialist, and even though you're a sovereign nation, I am ordering you to take one of your citizens, free him from your jail, and tell you that I think he's not a gang member, and you don't know gang members like I do in your country, and then I'm going to steal him from your country and send him back to my country. And they said, what are you, a running dog Yankee imperialist? We're not going to do that. I was such a loser. And the fact Tim Kaine is, something's wrong with him to think that he's going to bring that up. And then...
Yeah, South Africa.
And that was Von Holland. And then Tim Kaine did the South Africa thing. And the two of them made fools of themselves. It just reminded me they're so lucky to have two people in that administration, Scott Bessant and Marco Rubio, because I'm not saying that the others are not good, but what they do is when they have a controversy, they explain it, they show you what the truth is, but most importantly, they don't raise their voice, they're calm, they're exacting, they're analytical, and they're far smarter and better spoken than their critics. And you can see why on the tariff, the trade, the treasury, Bessant's profile has really it's risen. And this should remind everybody, Marco Rubio, when they were claiming that Trump wanted to invade Panama and he wanted to tear up the treaty, they sent him down there. And, he spoke Spanish, and after he just kind of clapped his hands and came back and said, well, we got an opportunity for BlackRock to buy the entry and the exit, and we're trying to wean these people off. They know what they're doing. They may say, oh, Yankee Imperial, but they know what they're doing. They invited the Chinese, they got the money from the Chinese, they were distancing themselves from us who built the canal and gave it to them, and helped engineer the independence of their country in a kind of a Yankee 19th century move. So my point is, he's very valuable. My only suggestion would be, you have an existential war with Putin and Ukraine, you have an existential negotiation with Iran and nuclear arms, you got an existential what to do with Hamas, Gaza, the hostages, and it's Witkoff. I think that's too much for one envoy, and I think those envoys should be returned to the State Department, because Trump trusts Marco Rubio. Every time today in our interview it came up, every time Trump has been asked about a third term, and he denies it now, he was kind of trolling them, but he always says there's great people. There's J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. And I think Mark Halpern said today, he didn't say who was going to be the top, he goes, I don't think you could beat J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio as a 1-2 ticket, because of the experience they've had and how well spoken they are and how they deal with the media. So his profile is rising, but because he agrees with Trump. He's a Jacksonian like Trump is. Trump is not in MAGA. He's not in completely in the J.D. Vance wing. He's not a nation builder. He blasted that. But he understands to have deterrence. Every once in a while you got to deal with a Soleimani or a Baghdadi or the Wagner group that's attacking you, and you don't have to do it much, but you have to be disproportionate. So if the Wagner group thinks they're going to go bully an American installation in Iraq, then you've got to destroy it utterly. And he did. And he did the same thing. If the people say, oh, you can't touch Baghdadi, you get rid of him. Or Soleimani, he's sacrosanct. And then you don't have to be interventionist. And so he squares that circle, and Rubio has squared that circle. So I would suggest, as a nobody from Selma, former raisin farmer, that he just might, want to entrust all of the envoys under his direction, because he agrees with Trump, and Trump trusts him. Trump should just say, Marco, we got all of these crises and wars, and we want to solve them all. Just get me somebody to help Witkoff, and you control it. You report to me, but let's get discipline, and not just take one person and make him go all over the world. You know what I mean? I think that he can do that.
I sure think he could. So, Victor, let's move on then to Tom Holman, and he has assured everyone that the representative from New Jersey, Monica MacGyver, will face criminal charges for assaulting an ICE officer as she tried to push her way into the facility. Now, I just want to say one thing that makes this more interesting, because MacGyver's argument is as a congresswoman, they have a right to go in and view the resources of the United States. So they were down there.
No, they have a right to request from an agency special treatment because they're an overseer of that agency as a legislative representative. They don't have a right just to join. You can't just say, I'm going to a prison or a police station. And she thinks she can. She's very entitled. The Democrats have told us, Alvin Bragg said it, Letitia James said it, Fannie Willis said it, Jack Smith said it, Judge Engoron, and they said no one is above the law. No one is above the law. No one is above the law. Of course, no one's above the law. So she thinks she's above the law, that she gets to go in and push her way and assault. I don't know how she thinks she's going to win, especially if they go to a grand jury. It's just there. She pushed the guy and she assaulted him. If you get pulled over and you try that with a policeman, you're going to be in big trouble. That's a felony. And I think she does it because she's seen what they have done. She saw that January 6 people were convicted of felonies for walking and charged with what? Illegal parading going into the Capitol, the ones that didn't do anything but violate, they went into a building where they didn't have public hours. So she looks at how they treated them, and then she looks at how they let off most of the people of the 2020 riots. She saw that the Hamas people swarmed the rotunda, the same rotunda, to protest and shut it down. Remember, when AOC was talking to them and Rashida Tlaib, they thought that was wonderful. And she saw what happened to Representative Bowman, who committed a felony when he set off the fire alarm to delay a congressional, and they only gave him a little tiny sensor. So she's thinking, you're not going to do anything to me. I can do whatever I want. I'm a representative. I don't know where, that's a sense of entitlement. And then when, of course, they did do something, she played the race card. But as I said, the race card is not working anymore. It's not working for a variety of reasons. To go back to that Rasmussen poll of the first 100 days, 62% of Hispanics thought Donald Trump was doing a good job and should continue doing so. 39% of African Americans agreed. All the other left-wing polls said Trump is suffering from historic anger. He's not. And the point that I'm making is part of his support is people are sick of racial divisiveness. They're sick of the DEI canon that says, if I'm part of the 30% Marxist binary oppressed victimizers, then by definition I cannot be an oppressor and I cannot be a victimizer. So now we have this whole explosive idea of race. Fannie Willis, remember when she got in a jam? Well, you don't understand black people. We use cash all the time, so of course I don't have receipts, even though I hired my boyfriend and we toured the country and on a cruise and we built the government, my agency. But you're racist for thinking that you don't understand that blacks always pay cash. And then we go to Letitia James, a proud black woman. Yes, I said that my father I was married to him, and yes, I tried to claim 2 different residences to get a tax break, and yes, I lied on a loan application, which I fined Donald Trump $375 million for, but I'm a proud black woman, and there you go. So and then we had the Caitlin Clark, Angela Reese little tiff, when Angela Reese kind of hit somebody and knocked her down. So then to stop her from scoring when she was undefended, Caitlin Reese did what they all do. They just slapped her on the arm so she wouldn't score easy and got a foul. And then Angela Reese then
started chasing her, didn't she?
Well, and then she commented they have a real problem if you think about the Women's Basketball Association. The majority of players are black. But with the entrance of Caitlin Clark, the majority of the spectators are now white. And it's not because she's white, it's because she's probably the best woman basketball player in a generation. So she's bringing in enormous revenue. So what are they going to do when all of these PC overseers of these national professional leagues, they always say they're so, take a knee, the NFL does it, they're all DEI. So what are you going to do when you have a black woman who used a racial slur, white gal? And why did she do that? Because the left feels that victimized people by statute or by de facto can do anything they want. They're exempt. They can never be victimizers. So we have Jasmine Crockett saying, they don't. Basically, she was in an interview and she's thinking, brilliant people like me won't ever be nominated. She didn't mention that AOC right now is leading in the polls for their future standard bearer. So she says, they're just looking for a safe white boy, just a safe white boy. What if they had said, what if you, instead of saying that Kamala Harris was a DEI candidate, you just said, oh, they just wanted some old black girl. What would happen to you? And then we had that tape that came up from Ilhan Omar about white men are a terrorist. It was racist. I could go on, but you're getting this new frustration that after all the DEI and all the special preferences and all the exemptions, people are tired of it. And so now they think it's fine to use racial epithets and slurs. White boy, white gal, white terrorist. And it's only going to dig deeper. They've already lost the white working class. They'll never get it back. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is saying, it's class, it's class, it's class. I'm your huckleberry. If you're a Hispanic painter, I'm your huckleberry. I shouldn't say huckleberry, that's kind of your foe, but I'm your hero because I have more in common with the white working class than the white working class has with Chuck Schumer. I have more in common, and I'm going to help you more than the Hispanics class than AOC, and I have a lot more empathy and worry more about the black inner city and middle class than does Jasmine Crockett. And he's taken race out of the equation and created class, and the Democrats go, oh my God, we've so slurred, victimized the white class and made fun of them. They don't like us anymore. They're voting 57% against us, so we need 90%, and we don't have it anymore. If Trump can get a signature peace deal in Ukraine or the Middle East or with Iran somehow, and the economy takes off with all this investment, he could actually pick up seats, which we haven't seen since 2002 in the midterm.
Yeah, that's probably true. But he seems to also be in his new zen, I would call it, where if you watched him today with the president of South Africa, he just was like blasting him with videos on the killings going on and a whole bunch of printouts of articles on the people that were dead in the most zen-like voice and pleasantness. And like, I can get along with you too, President.
People didn't mention that one of the reasons he got a deal from China wasn't just that anybody who has a $1.1 trillion deficit like we do, what more can they do to us? But if you have a $1.1 trillion surplus and your economy depends on it, you are vulnerable. Number one, there's 11,000 students in China, Americans. There's 300,000 here. They don't have to be here. They're here for one purpose. The Chinese government pays their way so they bring back technological expertise. And they don't have to spend as much on R&D because they're getting it from us. And Europe, there's thousands on green cards, and thousands came illegally. So Trump is just sitting there thinking, now let's think about South Africa. There's a lot of students here in the United States from South Africa. There's very few of us over there. If you were white, would you want to go over to that country? It's got one of the highest crime rates, and it seems to be race-specific especially. And number two, do we need South African students here? Do we need their market? They're going to shut us out of the South African market? Oh my God. Oh, maybe they have oil. No, they don't. So what is their, Trump is thinking, well, why do they have this sense that they just come over here and tell me, what to do, and they lie, and they just passed a law that said there's not going to be any compensation for confiscated land. It's aimed at the white farmer class. And the only reason, and then they're going to say, if it's in the eminent domain. And he said, well, that's like the United States. No, it's not like the United States. If you want to build a highway through somebody's property, it's adjudicated. High-speed rail made a lot of farmers millionaires here in the valley because they had to compensate. You're not going to give them anything, and it's going to be. And their problem in South Africa is, number one, they're 3 generations from apartheid, 2 and sometimes 3. So these young kids, 30, 40, were children when this thing happened. So they're going to condemn them on the sins of their fathers or grandfather, great-grandfather. And some of the families are 9 generations. But number 2, they look at Rhodesia and they think, well, they had land confiscation. They slaughtered a bunch of white farmers and they killed them off or drove them out. They had one of the largest per capita economies in Africa. They were a food exporter. They had one of the most efficient agricultural sectors in the world, and they destroyed it. And suddenly they were starving, and do we want to do that? And so they don't know what they want to do. They know what they're doing. They can't stop it. And Trump is just saying, you know what? I looked at your votes in the UN. You're one of the most anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic peoples in the world. You really are. You just damn Israel for everything. And you're anti-Semitic. And you're hostile to the United States. And you want to come over here and cut a deal with us? I don't have anything against you, but you're not Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela told the West that even though he was put in prison by an apartheid government, that he was not going to play tit for tat and do to them what they did to him. And that was the promise of South Africa. You broke that promise. You're just emulating the tactics of apartheid. Only even in apartheid, they didn't just go out and murder people. I mean, there were individuals, but the government, some of these gangs are sponsored by political parties. So what I'm getting at is that the world needs the United States more, and that was the big contribution of Donald Trump. He said, we don't have to apologize anymore. Reagan said that too, but he basically went one step further, and he said, you know what? We are the strongest country in the world, but we are not using all of our resources. If we use all of our energy, and we use all of our technology, and we protect it, and we don't give it away, and we stop funding people around the world with USAID that hate us, there's nothing we can't do. We're the place everybody wants to come. So, you want to come and talk to me? Fine. Don't lie to me that there hasn't been 50 or 60, 70 farmers every year that are murdered for their race and their property. Just don't do it here. And if you don't like it, leave. And that's the same attitude toward the Chinese, the same attitude toward the European. He basically said, we're subsidizing NATO. You still got 8 countries that won't pay their 2%. Canada, you don't want to pay it. That's fine. But when you get in a jam, don't call us to go bail you out 80 years after World War II. And now Europe is in a bind because Putin has now rebuffed Trump. And Trump has learned that Putin caused the war, and Putin is terrified to go back to his apparat, the military-industrial complex, the generals and the oligarchs and the communist leftovers and all those cutthroat people in Russia, and say, you know what? I had a brilliant idea of invading Ukraine because the Donbass and Crimea were not enough, and I was going to take over all of Ukraine. And now I've lost 1 million Russians dead, wounded, and missing, and our economy now is finally hemorrhaging, and I've wrecked the military for 10 years, and I've made the Ukrainians the largest army in Europe and one of the most sophisticated drone adversaries, and I can't conquer anymore. So I got to justify to you why I did all this. So I institutionalized Crimea. They might have taken, no, Vladimir, that is not enough. Why institutionalize Donbass? We don't have to get, no, Vladimir, not enough for that cost. Well, I'm 60, 80 miles from the border. No, Vladimir. But I got them to promise they'll never be in NATO. No, Vladimir. You better do better than that. Well, what do you want me to do? We want you to keep fighting and get either win the war or resign. And you know what happens if you resign? That's what he's terrified of. He's got to get something more to explain the blunder that he committed, and I don't think he's going to get it.
Yeah, there's nothing more to get
the Ukrainians
without doing the Ukrainian.
And Donald Trump, they're all critical of him, but he was, as I said earlier, is the only person who talked about the Stalingrad-like cost in human terms of how horrible it was. 1.5 million dead, wounded, and missing. He's not going to just cut Ukraine off. He's not going to, because it would be like Afghanistan on his watch. He's not going to do that. He's not going to fund them to go to Moscow, but he's going to find a way of making the Europeans pay more, and then they'll keep them viable. And he has one ace in the hole that no one's ever used. I think they used it against South Africa, and they might have used it in Turkey and that's a secondary boycott. If you tell the Russians, tell the world, anybody who buys Russian oil, anybody, China, you're not going to be in the banking system, you're not going to have any commerce with the United States. That would shut down the Russia. That would be dangerous to do because Russia would have no alternative, either to be humiliated and back off or to escalate.
Victor, let's go ahead and take a break and then come back and talk a little bit about Elon Musk, who is, I think he's had a little bit too much of politics. So stay with us and we'll be right back. Yeah.
Listen. Americans are fed up with Big Pharma controlling health care, raising prices, restricting access, and making it harder to get the medications they need. That's why more people are turning to All Family Pharmacy. You've probably heard of them. They're a family-owned pharmacy in Florida that does things differently. They put you first, giving you the freedom to order what you need, when you need it, so you're never without essential medications. From ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine to antibiotics, daily maintenance meds, and emergency kits, they make sure you have access to the treatments you need without restrictions. They know how important it is to stay prepared, which is why they make it easy to stock up and order treatments in bulk. It's simple. Just order online and they ship your meds to your door. You don't even need your doctor involved. They work directly with licensed doctors to get you the prescriptions you need. Visit their website today and get 10% off your order. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Victor and use the code Victor10. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/Victor and use the code Victor10, that's Victor10, to get 10% off your order today.
Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor's podcast on video on YouTube and on Rumble. So please come join us there. And on Spotify, it is the Victor Davis Hanson podcast. On Spotify is the name of the channel. So Victor, what are your thoughts on poor old Musk? He's said he's not going to be so involved in politics in the future.
Said poor old Musk.
Well,
so if you're worth $450
spiritual,
billion, now you're worth $350 billion. You're still the richest man in the history of civilization. And more importantly, his mind is intact and he's young. And he will be very wealthy again very quickly. And all these people who hate Teslas, now, when I drive down the road, I look in the windows, some of them look pretty left-wing. And they know that that Tesla is by far the best EV on the market. It's not even close. So he said he'd done enough. He's exhausted. They just trashed him. And the left, I don't think he ever thought that I think his way of thinking was, I provided free internet for the people of Los Angeles when they had no internet. I parked a bunch of cyber trucks with Starlink stations so that everybody would have internet. I saved Ukraine by giving them internet that powered all their drones. I saved NASA. It was a disaster. I created the most powerful rocket. I just saved Americans trapped in outer space. I saved social media. It was completely a left-wing dominated, censored, discredited fora. Now it's just a free, everybody does what they want. And so he looks at X, he looks at Starlink, he looks at SpaceX, and he looks at Tesla, and he's bewildered that people hate him. And he came late to the game of politics. He didn't endorse Trump until after he was the first assassination. And he probably voted for Biden. He doesn't talk about it, but it's pretty clear people have said he did. He voted for Hillary. But the left is unforgiving. You have to be 100% servile or you're an apostate. So he looked very troubled, especially when South Africa doesn't even want him to give them internet because he has to have 30% black owned. It's they copied that from us, by the way. Well, we have public projects where a certain number of the contractors have to be a certain color, because we're still in our racialist throes.
Oh, you mean the Obama Library is the thing that we've seen that most of it.
A lot of federal projects
yeah,
were that way. But he looked really troubled and bewildered, like, what did I do to you people? I've never met him. I will never meet him. I have nothing to gain or lose by saying this. But if you calibrate all of his endeavors in electric vehicles, space, internet, social media, Neuralink, you can make the argument that he is the greatest inventor, entrepreneur, Renaissance man in the last 500 years. He's Henry Ford, he's Henry Kaiser, he's Alexander Graham Bell, he's Thomas Edison all in one. And the idea that you would turn on him and hate him and try to destroy him and threaten him and destroy is just sick. What he's done for the United States is incontestable. I think the left is really, I don't even recognize the left. It's not even the peace and hippie free. I know there were terrorists like Bill Ayers and all that, but the 60s hippie left-wing nihilist movement was kind of pathetic, but it degenerated into terrorists and killers, but like Symbolize Liberation Front and all that. But I don't remember the rank and file so full of anger and hatred and bitter. Claire McClaskill, she's so mad she can't get over the fact she lost her Senate seat. And she said the American people were stupid to vote for Trump. They're just not smart enough. No, they were smart enough to get rid of you. That was a smart thing they did. And they were smart enough not to be governed by Kamala Harris with another 12 million illegals.
So Victor, let's go ahead and turn to a few cases and maybe news to the people and your comments on them. The first thing is Project Homecoming has taken home voluntary deportations, the first 64 this last week. I was right. I know, it's not much, but maybe it will start a flood. You never know. Yeah.
Especially if they say, if we catch you, and we're going to catch you, you can never come back here again. We'll put you in jail, and we're not going to let you in. So Donald Trump said something today that was profound. He was kind of startled when they were talking about Biden's illness and all of this. He said, who was in control? Who would do this? All that legislation with an auto pin? Who would ever do all this? He couldn't even imagine what they did at the border. Who would destroy the sovereign border of the United States? Why? It's going to take a generation to find those violent people. They'll never find the 10 million. And then the idea that the court system is going to adjudicate almost every one of those cases, which they didn't care one whit how they came in without adjudication. Every one of those people that they think suddenly has to have a drawn out multi-million-dollar trial broke the law. And they don't care. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it's a start. So the second case before the United States were criminal charges against the Maud ranchers, the family Maud, and they had criminal charges against them for a fence that had been on government land apparently, but near their own land since 1910. And the Biden administration instead of making it a civil lawsuit and reconciling it, they made it a criminal lawsuit. And then so Trump has decided to roll back on the criminal charges. So that was a good thing.
That's just a classic cultural divide in this country. So you have these people that 4 generations, they work the land, they're good custodians of federal land. They utilize it and produce things on it, they take care of it. And then you have some arrogant, sanctimonious, self-righteous, probably Ivy League lawyer, an environmental EPA, and then they have all the power of legislative, executive, and judicial at their fingertips, and they look at these people and they look kind of like working class people, and they think, you know what? I'm going to destroy these people. I'm going to go after them, and I want them off. I don't want any humans on federal land. Except me. And I'm going to go after them, and I'm going to bankrupt them. They're not going to know, to quote Chuck Schumer, they're not going to know what hit them. And it's good to see there's justice done by Trump.
And the last one was just Kash Patel has come out to say that Jeffrey Epstein, in fact, did die by suicide. And I know there were a lot of people that were worried about that decision. Do you have any thoughts on that? I thought it was interesting.
Well, I can't because they have so much more information than I do. The only thing that I was troubled by that is there is information that the people that were monitoring the jail, remember that they were
asleep or on computers in some fashion.
Weren't they looking for things to buy online on Amazon or something? I don't know, but he had no future ahead of him, and he was going to have to start atoning for his lifelong record of criminality, and they were going to take all of his precious money away from him and recompensate his victim. So I can see why he would commit suicide, but it's funny how he got away with committing suicide. That's what I don't understand. And Kash Patel
he's smart, so I'm going to say he's analyzed the case.
I said that when they appointed him. I said they don't understand how bright he is, and they don't understand. They went after him, tried to destroy him, and like they did Tulsi Gabbard. She's also very bright. So he's closing down the FBI building, but it's I don't understand how it's only 50 years old and it's structurally unsafe. Who built it? And then, we've talked on this broadcast forever that they should relocate the FBI headquarters and get at least a third of the workforce out of Washington, where the real hard criminals are. Not that they're not. Somebody wrote and said, Victor, there's a lot of criminals. They're just not as violent as you think in Washington. Third of the country. Maybe so, but the point is that he's going to disperse that nexus that gave us in succession Robert Mueller, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Christopher Wray with little cherry on top desserts of Stroke, Page, Kevin Klein-Smith, etc. What a character! What a cast of characters! Destroyed the FBI.
And the last thing in the news before I get to some comments on your articles and podcasts, Bill Maher seems to be trying to tell the Democratic Party to get beyond their caricature of MAGA as somehow very stupid and very racist, as we saw with Tom Hanks' caricature on Saturday Night Live.
Pathetic.
Bill Maher said that caricature of MAGA is his words were zombie lie. He's telling the Democratic Party, you need to figure out that that's not the only type of person.
The polls show it's a lie. The polls show it's a lie. I wish Tom Hanks would come to southwestern Fresno County and talk to the Hispanic community and ask them who has done more for you, Donald Trump or Joe Biden. He'd be surprised at the answer. But then again, they don't live in Malibu or wherever he lives. So these people are totally, I was just watching all this. Robert De Niro, God, he can't finish a sentence without full of hatred and vitriol. Then we've got Bruce Springsteen, he's worth $1 billion. So he puts on working class clothes, he plays as if he's a working class person, and then I don't mind if he's left wing, I don't mind if he endorses Kamala Harris. I like his songs, I always have. But this going overseas and then telling everybody that this guy's a dictator and destroyed America doesn't. And then all of them have lost their mind, and it's because they're impotent and no one listens to them. And they think they should have authority and influence because they're so sanctimonious, self-righteous, and narcissistic, and nobody cares anymore. They really don't. And I think the biggest anger is they're afraid that it's all going to work. Trump is going to be successful and help the country, and they just can't stomach that.
They can't, because they have been his worst critics, and they want to be sure that they're right.
Look at all the Wall Street Journal and all the bankers and all our geniuses, the best and the brightest. They told us the whole month of March that we were in a recession, basically, and Trump had tanked the entire stock market, and we were never going to recover. Now we're right back to where he was on January 10th or 12th, and we've got $10 trillion supposedly of foreign investment, and all the indicators are good, and yet Moody's downgraded them.
All right, so I have some comments to finish off the show here from Billy Miles Seal, and this was on your website. And I think you had an article about moving the FBI. And he says, I think the FBI has been corrupt from the beginning when J. Edgar Hoover was director. I'm kind of there with him. I think there was a lot of corruption in that department.
It was corrupt, but it wasn't necessarily political like it was. J. Edgar Hoover, basically, whoever the president was, they called him in and he opened a file on him and said, here's what you did. And then they said, okay, you're here. That's how it was corrupt.
And then just to continue with Billy's note here, perhaps the frontline agents are not corrupt, but only those with a tendency to corruption are promoted until the top levels have been distilled to pure evil. I pray for Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Thank you, Billy.
They're both very bright. That's what the thing the left doesn't understand. They think that anybody who's right-wing is stupid, and anybody who doesn't have degrees from their universities are stupid. I can tell you, I've been in their universities my whole life and visiting them. I have not met a more mediocre group of people than the profess area. Boy, if I wanted to ruin this house right here, this 150, I would call in 10 professors and I say, could you please rewire it? Or, you know what, I have a leak in the septic system. Could you go fix it?
Not.
Maybe I need to change these light bulbs to a more efficient. Can you do that?
All right, let's turn to our YouTube commenters. And this represents, I read lots of them today, and this is representative, and they're both very short. One is from Junk Girl 25005, and she says, I look for a new VDH video several times a day. You're the best. Signed, a former Democrat.
Oh, thank you. That's important. You know, I just said something about professors. I had a professor say this to me. So he said this, I was driving by and I saw a tractor parked with a big implement that had round circles. He said, that's a tandem disc or a, offset disc. So he said, but I have a question for you. How do they back up? They all have to go, they kind of just have to park, and then they just have to go straight, don't they? And I said, no, what do you mean? And he said, well, if they back up, the disc would slow them down, and it would dig in. And I said, do you think anybody ever invented a hydraulic lift that it would? He said, what do you mean? I said, maybe it would lift the disc up, and then it would drop it when it needed to disc. And I said, I think that's a carryover from the horse days. You think when they hitched a horse, the horse had to backpedal? Maybe they unhitched him or something. I don't know. And that was an academic, so I thought.
Oh my gosh. And here is from Reaccionaper. I hope I got his spelling pronounced right. Reaccionaper. Morning, Victor, and hot coffee. Life is good. Have a great weekend, everyone.
It's nice.
So your listeners are very happy on YouTube, and we're happy to have every one of you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you for all the recommendations on sinus relief. I must have had 50 of them, and I've tried all of them. Steve, iodine, colloidal silver, I put probiotics, and it worked great for 3 days, and now it's it's worse.
It's torturing you.
Yeah, I had the worst pain I had in 3 months, but I'm trying everything. But I think I have a surgery date. The doctor's going to call me, and finally got a date because they're very back.
And I would like to thank you, just like Jack did, that it's great to work for this show, especially today. I was reminded of that as I listened to Marco Rubio all morning, or a good portion of the morning, and his responses to the senators. That was awesome. I highly recommend it for anybody who likes good sport.
They don't take anything. Kash Patel doesn't take anything off anybody, and either does Tulsi Gabbard.
And they're very polite, and they get cut off by the senators, and they just accept
RFK
it.
came a close second when Patty Murray, that relic senator from Washington, started to attack him about all the things, and he said, "You've done more to destroy healthcare in the United States."
Yeah, I was watching that. He said that you've done nothing to solve chronic illness. Yeah, he says, what has she done, what has Senator Murray done about the epidemic of chronic disease in the United States?
Well, you know what, I do say one thing, though. It is true we spend the most money per capita, and we don't have our longevity is behind Europe and average in Japan. But a person wrote me, and I'm always trying to read email, text, and they pointed out we have a record 55 million people who were not born in the United States, and most of them come from impoverished countries with enormous health problems. Many of them are the obesity rates of, he pointed out the obesity rates of many of the countries that people come from are higher than our own even. So we have, people don't remember, I hadn't really calculated that when you have, 1/7 of the country that are not born here, and they come as an adult or a young person, and they're coming from places that don't have a lot of investment in healthcare, then that might account for some of it.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Victor. Thanks to our audience. This is Sammy Wink and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.
Thank you, everybody. Much appreciated for watching and listening.